just came to the conclusion what we were doing was not working, and a change in direction was needed.
A change in direction was needed, and the Jaguars have changed direction indeed. Welcome here into Teal the Show. We've got Frank Frangie in the building. Frank, it was a boring day on the Jaguars front, right?
Yeah, nothing to talk about. Quiet stuff day after the season. It was quite the newsy day, and an interesting day. The way the thing played out. I'm not sure anybody thought it would play out exactly the way it did, and I think it's left us all talking about it for sure.
So the way it played out is the Jaguars have moved on from head coach Doug Peterson. They're going to get a fresh start under a new head coach, but maybe the most important part of this for at least a lot of fans out there, Trent Baalke going to be sticking around for another year.
It's one of the few times I've ever seen a story where a head coach got fired, but that wasn't the biggest story in town. I think because there's been so much talk about Trent Baalke, whether you like Trent or don't, everybody's been talking about the general manager. And I think, for better or worse, the fact that Trent is still here is more of a story, or certainly more of a talking point on all the talk shows and whatnot, than the fact that Doug is not. Very interesting dynamic. But Trent Baalke stays, and Doug Peterson gone after 3 years.
As the news came out, the players were in the locker room afterward cleaning out their lockers. Many of them shared some surprise that Doug Peterson was gone, and also said that they loved playing for Coach.
Obviously, it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, we all had a hand in this season and just how the way things have shaken out. I have a ton of respect for Doug. He's made me a better football player, a better man, and I think he's one of the better coaches to have coached in this league, and it's just unfortunate the way that things went, but obviously the organization has to make a decision that they feel is best going forward.
Yeah, it stinks. I mean, especially because I spent all his time here with him, and he's helped me a lot grow as a man, as a football player. So, unfortunately, you hate to see it, part of the business there.
It was kind of shocking, just as a second-year player, just learning how this league is and the business side of it was. Coach Doug, a really good coach, taught me a lot of things, and I really appreciate it.
Look, I have a lot of good things to say about Doug. He's a great coach, a great mentor, a great leader of men, so I really appreciate him, and I learned a lot from him, and he's just a good person at the end of the day. So it's really good when you can have a coach that's a good person, and you can learn from him, and I wish him nothing but the best. And it's a tough part of the business, but sadly it's results-based, and it's tough.
Yeah, many of the guys kind of echoed those same sentiments that Doug Peterson was one of the better coaches that they had played for, and that they also understood that the NFL was a results-based business, and they didn't have the results on the field.
Yeah, two things. Number one, he's very well liked in that locker room. He's the players' coach. I think everybody knows that. Some coaches connect with their players more, and he's one of the ones that do. The other thing is they know he's a really good coach. I mean, again, this guy won a Super Bowl. He now is the only Jaguars coach in history to have more winning seasons than losing seasons. He's 5-1 against the Tennessee Titans. That's an .833 winning percentage. Nobody here's ever done that. So he's done some really good stuff, never had a losing season in the division. So he's done some really good things, and I think the players understand that. But you're right, it is a business, and I think when you get into this business, like the players have, everybody understands there's a business side of it, and sometimes a coach you don't want to see let go gets let go. I think they all understand that.
Brenton Strange called it cutthroat.
Yeah.
And the NFL can be just that. Look, this is a change. The Jaguars needed a little bit of change. Maybe this breathes a little life into them after what we saw the second half of last season and then this past season where it never really got rolling. Frank, do you think that this was the right move to shake things up in this fashion? A new leader going into next year, a fresh message.
Yeah, I certainly understand it. I certainly understand what they did and why they did it. I probably would have gone one more year with Doug Peterson for all the reasons I said before. Remember now, he took over the disaster that was the Urban Meyer year and had him in the playoffs in 1 year. Had him winning a playoff game in 1 year, had him win a winning season, and then had a winning season the second year, although it got away from him at the end. I think even though the last 13, 14 games weren't very good, I still, if it had been me, would probably have given him one more year to kind of correct what went wrong. So, but I understood what they did. They're trying to get it done quickly. I'll say this about Shad Khan. Shad's trying to get it right. He cares about this team. He's got a lot of money invested here. He's got heart and soul invested here. He's proud just like those other owners are, and he wants to win. So he's trying to get it right. Whether or not this is the right move, we'll know soon enough, I guess.
I think the one thing that happened in this one, Frank, is he kind of missed the pulse of the fan base.
Yeah.
After the last home game, you got a banner flying over the stadium that says, "Fire Balky." And that's the guy that you ultimately opt to keep. That's not going to make folks happy. And obviously, you can't let the fans and impulses drive the franchise. But he believes in consistency with the holdover to kind of add that consistency and stability to the franchise. You'd also get some consistency and stability to the franchise if you bring in a head coach and a general manager at the same time that have the same messaging and the same timeline.
Well, Shad is a guy, and I understand. Look, this guy has businesses all over the world. He's traveled in Europe. He's in Canada. He's all over the place. So he's got to trust his key lieutenants. That's what happens. You have to trust your key lieutenants, and he certainly had to do that. On the business side, he trusts his key lieutenant, who's Mark Lamping. Well, he happens to have a superstar over there. Mark Lamping. If Mark Lamping was graded on wins and losses, he'd be about 15-2 every year. He's really, really good at what he does. That stadium and all the stuff he's done. Well, his football lieutenant is Trent Baalke, who hasn't had the same success, but that's who Shad trusts. He trusts a lieutenant on either side, and so he trusts Trent. And if Trent says, listen, what's gone wrong is the coaching, it's not the personnel, that's what I believe, I think Shad defers to his chief lieutenant of football, and that's Trent Baalke.
Well, that's the trust factor with Shad Khan. We'll see if it's the right move. Coming up next here on Teal the Show, we'll talk about some of maybe the candidates that'll be in the running for the next Jaguars coach and hear what players would like to see in the leadership for next season. That's straight ahead when Teal the Show comes back. All right, welcome back here into Teal the Show. The Jaguars have a vacant head coaching position. We expect it to be one of the top jobs in the league. It should be a sought-after one. Every NFL head coaching job is a sought-after one. Doug Peterson, we talked about him early in the show, did a solid job, but now it's time for new leadership. We got a chance to catch up with some of the guys in the locker room to see what they would like to see in their next head coach.
I think what this team seems to need is just, like you said, a leader of men, which seems to be, that's exactly what you look for every time. I think this team is younger, on the younger side, so someone that can relate in that aspect. I think especially the guys coming into the league with NIL and college, it's a different generation, different mindset. So guys that can relate in that aspect.
We just need our own standard, we just need our own identity, who we are, and build that and hold each other accountable for good, bad, and move on from it and just flush stuff and don't harp on it and go out and play ball what we're here to do, and I feel like that's how we got to approach next year.
I know we're a young team, so I would definitely love to have someone, kind of relatable to us, in a sense. Somebody with some passion. I love to play with somebody with some passion and somebody just feels strong about what we got going on here.
But Frank, look, overall, they need a leader that can connect with the players and really set the culture in that building.
I think there's going to be two types of coaches available. There are two types of coaches available, and the Jags have to figure out which way they want to go. There's the tough-nosed, really tough, hard-nosed coaches that are going to set that culture. That's Mike Vrabel. That's Brian Flores. They're defensive-minded guys, but, man, you're going to have to be tough if you play for those guys. They're no-nonsense guys. Then there's the offensive minds, Ben Johnson and Liam Cohen and Todd Monken and Joe Brady. They're more offensive-minded. Here's the key. Can you get a guy that really understands offense and is tough and hard-nosed? And I think if you can put that combination. But those are the two coaches that are out there. The Vrabels and the Brian Flores, who are known for how tough they are, and the Liam Cohens and the Joe Bradys and the Ben Johnsons, who are known for what good passing games, what offensive minds they are. It's going to probably be one of those two types.
All right, let's talk about a couple of those names that you threw out there just for a second. So let's start with the defensive guys maybe, because the priority for this franchise is to get the most out of Trevor Lawrence. That's what's going to get you over the hill. Frank, if you get a defensive coach, the first thing you got to ask him is, well, who's your offensive coordinator going to be? The top defensive guys you kind of mentioned, Mike Vrabel.
Yeah.
You didn't mention Aaron Glenn, who's the other Giants coordinator, who I think is going to be high on a lot of folks' lists. He was a former Jaguars player at a time.
Yeah, I think so. I think Mike Vrabel is the best candidate out there.
Yes.
I think Vrabel's the best candidate. And I think before Aaron Glenn, I think Brian Flores. If I did a list of the defensive head coaches, I would have Vrabel 1 and Brian Flores 2. But you know this, in this offensive age, any of those three guys have to know what they're going to do on offense. When you show up for the interview, you're not just going to say, well, I'll pick a good offensive guy. You'll show up. That's how these coaches do it. Jamal, you'll show up at the interview. This is exactly who I'm bringing in to run the offense. And I promise you, all of those guys have a guy.
If you were making the decision, would it concern you to look at, let's take Mike Vrabel for example. In Tennessee, he brought in offensive coordinators, but because of their success, they saw the playbooks walk away until it was finally at the end where he ran out of those rock star offensive coordinator candidates and the offense started to struggle. Would that sort of track record, because that can happen to a defensive head coach because he's not the offensive playbook guy?
Not a bit. It's a good question, but not a bit. I think Vrabel, I said this about Doug Peterson. Be careful when you fire a good football coach because they're hard to find, and that was my concern a little bit with the Jags. I think Doug Peterson's a really good football coach. Mike Vrabel's a good football coach. Tennessee fired a good football coach, defensive-minded guy, and brought in an offensive head coach, and how did that work out for him? So I would not worry about that at all with Vrabel. I think Vrabel and Ben Johnson are the two top guys on the market. There's a lot of good coaches, but if any of these teams that are available, the Patriots, the Jets, the Saints, the Jags, the Bears, anybody that's got an open job, if any of those five could land either Mike Vrabel or Ben Johnson, I think they'd be very happy.
All right, let's talk about Ben Johnson because I know he's on a lot of Jaguars fans' wish list, Frank. Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator up in Detroit. He's been there. That Detroit offense has been fantastic this year. What do the Jaguars have to do to land this guy? You got to think it's between Jacksonville and Chicago for him, right?
Yeah, if they both want him, I would think those are the two he's going to consider because they both have young, bright quarterbacks. Of the 5 jobs that are open, now Drake May's pretty good too, but I would think Trevor Lawrence and Caleb Williams would attract a head coach faster than Drake May would. That's my opinion. I think all the talk is, would he be able to have a little bit of control? So as he works with Trent Baalke, would he have the control to fill out the personnel? Other than that, I think Ben Johnson, there's not much here he wouldn't like. I think he's a small-town guy. He's from North Carolina. He and his wife would rather live in a small town than Chicago. At least that's what we're told. He's a Southern guy. He loves quarterback play. He's got a very good one here in Trevor Lawrence. He's a laid-back guy. He's an easygoing guy. My guess is Mark Brunell would come with him in some capacity. He's the quarterback coach under Ben right now. They have a great relationship. Yeah, I think we do. I think they have a great relationship. They're buddies. So I think this job, if the Jags wanted Ben Johnson, I think this job would fit him more than any of the other jobs, and I can't fathom them not wanting him. So I think all you hear about Ben Johnson being a leading candidate, I can't think for a minute that he wouldn't be. I've got to believe if he's not candidate 1, he's got to be very high on the list.
All right, let's say the Jaguars strike out on Ben Johnson. A couple of the other offensive guys, Liam Cohen, not far from here over in Tampa Bay, should be an option. A guy like Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, should also be a name that's on the list. Frank, do either one of those names, do they get you excited?
I think Ben Johnson, Liam Cohen, and Joe Brady are all very similar. Have not been head coaches, are passing game guys, are young, they would connect with players, they look the part. One other offensive guy you didn't mention is Todd Monken. Todd Monken's a guy that I think really moves the needle. He's been a head coach. He's been in both college and the NFL. He's been in both the AFC and the NFC. He's a guy with experience. He thinks like a young guy, but he's a guy with a lot of experience. He's not one of the young guys, but he's an offensive-minded guy that has really been successful anywhere he's been. And he's also coached on the Jaguar staff, so he understands the city, he understands the area, he understands the fan base. Todd Monken would make a lot of sense to me, too, as well as those other offensive guys.
All right, Frank. You made it pretty clear your top 2 names on your list were Ben Johnson and Mike Vrabel.
Yep.
If you had to pick between the two, which one would you do?
Well, I don't think Vrabel's going to be in play here. I think Vrabel's going to the Patriots. I think the whole point with the Patriots is when they saw he was available and he started talking to the Jets, I think that's why they fired Gerard Mayo so they could hire him. So I think the next time we do a Teal the Show, he might not be available. I think Ben Johnson is the guy the Jags will pursue the hardest. I think he's the guy that makes an awful lot of sense, and I think there's a good chance he'll be the next coach. Now, they got to want him, and again, he's obviously they're going to go deep into the playoffs, I would imagine. But I would be surprised if there's not a real connection between the Jags and Ben Johnson. That would surprise me.
I would agree with you there. I think that's the name at the top of the list. We'll see what ultimately happens. All we can do is wait and see. Wait and see. Hopefully it won't be a long wait, though.
That's right.
Hopefully it won't be a long wait. Frank, thanks for being here tonight. Thank you at home for tuning in. Good night, everybody, and go Jags.